Shubha needs any introduction. We're just so completely delighted to have you here. And I have to say a little secret out loud. When I was in college, in University of Chicago, I met this lady who said she knew you. And I said, "Do you know Shubha Mudgal?" And she said, "Yes, I do. Would you like to meet her?" And I said, "Yes." So this is for me a huge, and of course, as luck would have it, over time when I was working at Prithvi, I got to meet Shubha, and you and Anish had done that wonderful program at Prithvi. And it's such an absolute delight having you here today. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here, and I'd like to begin with an apology for just about making it to the venue in time or a little later than I should have been here. But we encountered yet another festival in the many pantheon of festivals that we have in India, and I believe that's causing a traffic jam everywhere. So my apologies for being a little late. When we were talking about Mumbai Local and what possibly our conversation, what direction our conversation could take, I thought that I'd like to share some of the twists and turns that my journey as a student of music have taken, and some of the conflicts that personal conflicts that I've had to sort of sort out for myself again and again. They never seem to unravel completely. But I'd like to say at the very beginning that this is not a story about a huge struggle. This is not a story about, hardship and really having to do things which one didn't want to do. This is really a sharing of facts, which I'm sure many students of music may actually be asking themselves constantly, and it would be wonderful for me to hear those stories as well in return from many of you. But I started studying Hindustani classical music unconventionally late. Normally people start when they're about 5 or 6, they start lessons. I started my talim, my formal training in Hindustani classical music only when I was in college. So it was about 17 when I started formal training. But as a 4-year-old, I was growing up in a home where my parents were teachers of English literature at the Allahabad University. Both were completely, passionately crazy about the arts and would do really crazy things like ride on a Lambretta scooter from Allahabad to Varanasi to hear a music concert. Or suddenly come home on a Friday evening and say, get ready, and we're going to hear a music festival, and all of us would be bundled into the neighbor's car, dropped at the railway station, and by the night we would find ourselves in Maihar, in Madhya Pradesh, hearing the big festival that takes place annually over there. So these were the kind of vacations that we took and the holidays that we were treated to. But I grew up in this home which was really surrounded by books and teachers and poets, people from theatre, and sort of normal conversation would be an argument about Faiz Saab's poetry or Firaq Saab's poetry. Since my parents were teaching in the university, they were also given a place to stay near the university campus at a place called Bank Road in Allahabad. And it was this kind of, circle of row houses, and our neighbor was none other than Firaq Puri. So we would hear him yell out and often abuse people, very colourful language. So apart from the poetry, there was also the colourful language that I was privy to. But that's the kind of place I grew up in, and there was this kind of deep passion and respect for the arts. And I don't remember if my parents ever told me that studying music or dance or read poetry, but stop doing that, when your exams are near, or when the board exams are near. Nobody ever told me that. And they just said, no, it is wonderful to have music and arts in your life. And as a very small child, as about a 4-year-old, I started learning Kathak. And I'm told that I did something horribly silly, and I think you can only do that when you don't understand the profound world of the arts. But I believe my very first examination in Kathak, I was made to do a practical exam, which was to actually dance before the examiner. And then I also had to do a theory class, a theory exam. But since I couldn't write well enough, they said they would do a verbal test. And the first question that the examiner asked me was, "Kis gharane ka naachti ho bitiya?" And back came the reply. I thought, "Ghar and gharana are the same, so aapne gharane ka." I just thought, I had to give a reply. Without knowing what I was saying. Of course, this statement has followed me all my life, and at various embarrassing points I'm told, "Aapne tab kaha tha ki aap apne gharane ka naachegi." Now have you achieved that? and I'm always saying, my God, I couldn't say that today if I had to. But basically, I started learning dance, and I learned dance. Now don't look at me like that, I didn't learn dance. I was 50 kgs lighter at one point. So I learned dance, and I learned Kathak in the Jaipur style for many, many years. And as part of my Kathak training, there came a point when I was being taught Abhinay. And it is the tradition that Kathak dancers do Abhinay to a form of music called Thumri. And many of them used to be accomplished singers and dancers. At this point, my mother suggested that I should take formal lessons in music also, vocal music also. And she felt that an interdisciplinary kind of approach would be good for me. And indeed, most syllabi that exist in the country for either dance or music actually suggest that if you're learning vocal music, you should be able to play a little on the tabla, on the harmonium. You should know basically some amount of information you should have about other forms and styles as well. So that's how my talim in vocal music started. And then I think I was about 17, and 17, 18, I was about to give appear for my BA final exam. And then my mother gives me this wonderful choice one day. She says to me that, I think I can see that this is what you love best. Music is what you love best. And I don't see why you should have to do the BA MA course that everybody is doing. But I think you need to now decide to make a commitment to music. And so after you graduate, I think I'm happy to give you a year off to decide what you want to do. Do you want to pursue academics, or do you want to do music full time? I was looking back on that moment. I think that was a life-changing moment for me. And of course, my father was a little grumpy about it. It was a generous offer, but I think he went along with it. I think it was just a show, of saying that, no, I think that's too. What are you saying, kind of thing. But I think he also enjoyed the idea of letting me make that choice. I don't think it took me a year, it took me about a month to, and then she and my father really put me through the paces, which is where all this idea of our talk today about finding one's voice comes from. So I started my formal lessons in Hindustani classical music in Allahabad from a very, very eminent scholar, musician, composer called Pandit Ramashray Jha. His pen name was Ramarang, and in the world of Hindustani classical music, he's highly revered as one of the greatest contemporary composers. He was never he didn't perform too much, although when he performed, he was a vibrant, wonderful performer. But he chose to be a teacher and to be a scholar and a composer. And about half of Allahabad, where I grew up, was learning from him. So how did my lessons start? I would be woken up early in the morning. I'm not a morning person, but early in the morning, my mother, my father would wake me up and I would grimace and be, just 5 minutes more, 5 minutes more, no, come on. And we would ride then to my Guruji's home, which was a very modest, very small place. When we approached, it would be anywhere between, let's say, 5:30 or 6. they would reach in the morning. And I would always hear his tanpura and his voice practicing at that time. And when I entered, you know, there was always a lot of suspense, because when I entered, I would hope that there would be nobody else there. But very often there would be 3 other people there before me, who had reached before me, which meant that they would be taught first. Mind you, there was no question of a fee, there was no question of paying him anything. So you just went there if he accepted you as a disciple, and you went on the days when he permitted you to come there. And if you were late by, let's say, a fraction of a second and 3 other people had arrived before you, then you just sat down on a corner and listened to them being taught. Just imagine that if he's teaching for even an hour, it was always more than that. But if each person is taught for an hour, that's like 3 to 4 hours of constant teaching. At that point, you realize that you are not going to get your lesson. But you could, that the fact that you were permitted to sit there and listen to the talim being received by other people, that in itself was considered a privilege. Mind you, I didn't realize that at that point of time. I would be very fretting, you know, I would be fretting a lot and saying, I went there at 5:30 in the morning and I didn't get my lesson. That's not fair. But that's the kind of ethos in which Hindustani classical music traditionally is taught and learned. You go, there is no syllabus that is followed, it's a customized training that is given to you. And at that point of time, the first thing that you learn is to be imitative. You listen to your guru's voice, you listen to you watch his mannerisms, you listen to the inflections, you see how he moves his hand, and you try and do the same thing. At some point, I mean, I think it's really a question, at that point the ambition is to sound as close to your guru as possible. Little do you know that the guru is already teaching you to start taking your own direction, but you don't realize that. Because you're saying, there's not a word, never does he say good. You know, never does he say, okay, not too bad. You're always getting, you know, getting a whip. So what is it, you know, every time I would go back. And there's this other anecdote which I've mentioned earlier, but I will repeat it to you. Just to show you the kind of space that the learning, that the entire idea of transmission of this wonderful system of music, how it is created. So there would be many people listening to your talim also. And now, as I've already said, here was this very eminent scholar, this Vidwan, you know, and far more senior musicians, people who are already teaching at the university, they would be learning from him. And there I am, possibly the youngest of the students. And I start learning, everybody is waiting for their turn. So there's, you know, there's very impatience. When I started going to Panditji, to Guruji, I had a ear for music, and I had a fairly good oral memory. So, you know, I would go to the films and learn the film songs and then come on boast to my friends, I got it in the first hearing, you know. And they would say, what nonsense, you can't learn a song in just one listening to it. And I'd say, hey, buy me the next ticket and I'll sing you the song. So I had a fairly good oral memory. But mind you, none of that really helps you in that talim session. Okay, it can help you get not to be thrashed in the first 5 minutes, but in the next 10 minutes you're going to get it good and proper. So, you know, when I went to him, I had that oral memory, and I could pick up the bandish, the basic composition I could pick up, but nothing more than that. There was this huge vocabulary, complex grammar, expression, accuracy of pitching, the complex world of tal, so many musical devices to learn, and all of this with an audience also, of people who are much better at it than I was. So there was this one section, you know, of tan, the faster passages, which I'd never trained, so I could never get it right. And the entire group of my senior Guru Bhai and Guru Behan, everybody would wait with bated breath for that moment, because they knew that was the point where I would get my, tongue lashing of the day. And every time I would go back, and on the way back, I would tell my father, this is too much, I feel too humiliated, I'm not going to go back next time. And my father would literally stop the scooter at the corner and say, excuse me, did you practice what he told you to practice? How dare you say this? I could have been on your side if you had practiced and then not got it. But you didn't, I didn't hear you sing the whole week, and then you go back there shamelessly, and now you're complaining about his giving you a tongue lashing. So I thought to myself, with the arrogance that only I guess you can have at that point of time, I'm going to show him, I'm going to practice all week, and I'm going to show him I can do this. So I go home and I tell my mother, don't talk to me please, do nothing, I'm not to be disturbed. I pick up my tandoor and go for it. 1 week of sheer, I'm going to go back, or then stop learning. A week later I go back. And everybody is there as usual, waiting. Dance section comes. Everybody starts shifting around. My God. I've got this stupid grin on my face. I'm saying, I'll show you. So there I go, Chaliye, taan gaiye, Guruji says, with a kind of resignation that this is the end of the lesson. So I said, yeah, sure. And there I take one taan. Looks at me a little surprised. Everybody, thank God. Aage chaliye. Next one. Slightly longer one. Yeah, sure. Again, I've still got the grin on my face. So I go for the second one. Everybody's now relaxed, So I do the third one with a flourish. And then Guruji says, okay. And he gives me a different pattern, which he hasn't taught me. Boom. I'm there, flat on my face. And then he looks at me. Ab kahan gayi chaturai? I sort of share this incident because the kind of training and the kind of vision that the Guru has about your feet of clay, which are all too apparent to him, and which you're always trying to hide in the camouflage. They're so, they teach you what to try and improve on your weaknesses. But this is the kind of space, the kind of intense, demanding rigor that the Taaleem makes you appreciate. But you spend so many years, in a tradition which really begins when you start learning, you're imitating. A great deal of significance is set by the fact that you belong to a particular gharana. If you don't belong to a particular gharana, then you're a pariah. Where do you come from, So, a great deal of significance lies in your allegiance to a particular style. And I would always wonder, that where then is the individuality which everybody talks about? And this, I feel, must be a constant question that perhaps a lot of people studying classical music would ask. If you need to sound like your Guru, or the great icons from your gharana, then what about you? What do you do? Of course, the tradition also gives us examples of path breakers who studied in a particular gharana but found their own wonderful voices, their own wonderful expression. And you're constantly, so it's a journey constantly of really finding ways in which that kind of gharana resemblance is retained in your singing. And that's where the Taaleem is so important. And the fact that they actually teach you how to find your own way through the music that you keep working on for your entire life. The more brilliant, the more special, the more the genius in an artist. For example, to name only a few, there have been many, but let's say Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab or Amir Khan Sahab or Kumar Gandharji, all of these people were path breakers. They all were rooted within a tradition, all revered tradition, and yet they found their own voices. But many like us continue to struggle through our years of learning and teaching, trying to find our voices. So one, of course, is the struggle to find your voice, which is really the sound of your voice. What does it sound like? But there's also, when you say a voice, there's also a metaphorical use of the term voice, because each was from the person. So the many concerns, the many areas of life that impact you. People often ask, so you're singing for a cause, let's say. How do I see that cause in the music? And there is really no way in which I can say, this particular lap, that's about what's happening in Gaza. I can never say that, because it's never so easy. All of that impacts you, and yet it's really a tapestry that can't be torn apart, and you can't do the warp and weft separately and say, this is where, these are my particular concerns. About style, about form, about protest, about making a point about something that I really hold very dear. All your life, basically, you keep trying to find answers to this question about your voice. And then with a voice, let's say like mine, which is very, let's put it kindly to begin with, androgynous. So, around 1996 or so, a lot of people started calling me. I recorded an album called Ali Mure Angana, which became quite popular. And it happened completely by accident. But then everybody started calling me to dub film songs or to invite me to be part of non-classical music. And with the film world, it used to be very interesting because the music composers would usually tell me, very often it wasn't the composers who were calling, it was their assistants or somebody from the unit who would call and say, "Aap hi ke liye gaana likha hai? Aap hi ga sakte hain." So I would say, well, what does that mean? Is it some classical kind of song? No. कुछ और है, आप आइए एक बार सुनिए उसको, फिर आप ही के लिए लिखा है. So I would think to myself and say, what are we singing for the films, So I would go ahead. It would be a song which was, for a high-pitched, tinkling, clear, bell-like voice, which had been made for me. So even if I had to be reborn, I wouldn't be singing that song. Simply because physically I cannot sing at that pitch. And I would say, no, ये तो मेरे सुर का गाना ही नहीं है. You've put it on you've made it composed on a key that I can't sing on. And then they would say, पर आपके voice में तो हमने we heard Ali Mure Angana, उतना ऊपर गाया है आपने. So this is not even that high. But always, and I would say, where is the song? How is it going to be used in the film? बिल्कुल आपके वॉइस के लिए सही है. ये बंजारा होगी, जिप्सी है, एकदम जैसे सूफी टाइप होता है ना. I'm wondering, I've spent the last 25 years training my voice, and they're telling me it's for a banjara. And also the song says something about titli titli, my voice is hardly the titli type voice. And then they would invite me, even recently actually, some people really enjoy that song. I dubbed a song for a television serial called Diya Aur Bati. And I was told that I have to sing the title song, and then later when I reached the studio, I was told that Kailash Kher is also going to sing the song. Now that put me in a complete flap, because I thought, oh my god, that means it will be very high, and because I can't sing a duet, because in films, most songs are, for duets particularly, are recorded at a pitch which is too high for me again. So usually you'll find duets between male and female singers usually have this very, thin, like soprano kind of voice. And I can't do that, So I thought to myself, how am I going to do this? And are they going to use a machine or something to change the pitch or something? So I said, please tell me if you're going to do that. So no, not at all. Kailash has said he will sing in any scale. Fantastic. And then I was sent the song, and everybody at home, was curious about what this, soap that I've sung for. So they asked me that, you've sung a duet with Kailash Khed? Yeah, I have. So they said, what was it like? I said, well, I'm sounding like his grandfather, that's all. but the idea of using voices which are, androgynous, let's call it, for the sake of kindness, but no, which are not really in the mold, strictly in the film mold. Again, it makes you wonder about these kind of stereotypes that we've all, in fact, even accepted. Very often, automatically people will say, oh, no, this is not suited for you. It could be a song which perhaps, I would like to sing it, I can sing a lullaby, for example, but no, it will be the other Aapke Liye wala gana, which will be given for me. But these are constant areas, of which I keep analyzing, and of course all these issues are never really solved in one go. So even when you feel that you have been able to, let's say, find your own way of dealing with the complex system of Hindustani classical music, that you feel that a certain competence has been achieved, it's never satisfying. Because you always feel that, okay, that was what I did. When you look back on your work, in retrospect, there are so many things that you need to again say, no, the voice is dynamic, the voice is organic, it keeps changing as you age, and I am aging, unfortunately, but it keeps changing, you have to keep examining it, you have to keep being brutally analytical, you have to keep saying, finding your own comfort zone, and I guess, frankly, that these are the things that really make it such a wonderful journey of constant discovery, learning. Even when you're teaching, you're learning actually. And I have now started teaching. I've been teaching for a while. One of my students is here. And so, did I do the same things? But you learn to be even the voice of the teacher, and again the metaphorical voice. How did your guru teach? He taught brilliantly. He was a wonderful teacher. But what kind of a teacher am I going to be? What role am I going to play? How is my voice as a teacher, not the literal voice? How is it going to impact the lives of my students? And what will I take from my guru? What will I try and bring in on my own? Because we live in a changing world. It's not possible to say, no, this was the tradition, and I'm not going to change anything, because the tradition itself is a living tradition and constantly changing. So these are the areas that really, take up a lot of my time, and the questions that keep popping up, and the many conflicts and struggles, not the hardships, but the constant areas of development that I keep looking at. Would you have any questions?
Yeah, did you take questions? Yeah?
Yes.
Do you? I think you can go on. Anyone?
Do you like to listen to music more or sing?
I can't be a singer if I don't listen. I have to be a good listener. And I'm a fairly keen, good listener. Anish and I buy a lot, my husband and I buy a lot of music. We have a large collection of music which we keep enticing each other with. Sometimes he has a recording which I don't have. And when I ask him for it, where did you get it? He says, I have my sources, very mysteriously. And then when I have something in my collection, he asks me, I just, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not disclosing my sources.
in terms of, you talked about the living tradition, and you talked about, there are so many gharanas, there are so many people who do learn music and land up in Bombay without any further, they don't know what to do, and also there is some amount of integration happening when lots of people compare Indian Hindustani music or traditional music with jazz. Would you throw some light on your thoughts on how this living tradition and how the modifications are happening, and what do you think is the way forward for, let's say, a young musician who's reasonably well trained and lands up in Bombay without knowing where to go?
Well, Bombay has actually been a city which has for many decades attracted both the great masters and also many people wanting to learn and make a mark. But yes, currently a lot of music students and a lot of people who would like to make a commitment, a full-time commitment to classical music find it very difficult. There is no one way forward. Many of them then choose to do, let's say, a job during the day and be committed to music during the rest of the time. But for those who wish to make that, just focus on music, it is a life of great hardship. The messages that we are getting currently are very, very, let's say, discouraging. When you see, let's say, a television show, which is like a talent hunt, there are wonderful voices and extremely talented people who are chosen. But the message that the student of classical music gets is that if you do that, only then will you be able to make a mark. So it requires a great deal of resolve, a great deal of personal strength, and I think students who are really supported by family and are very secure in the kind of unconditional support that, let's say, Anish and I have received from our families, are able to make that commitment. Otherwise, it is very, very difficult because constantly people feel that this is an ancient tradition, this is something archaic and should be preserved because it's old. But what very many people don't realize is that it's very much, in fact, in many ways it's more contemporary than many other, because it's non-representational. So it's, in many ways, it's even more contemporary than perhaps other forms of music. Also that, there are of course changes in the way. Today we are all used to singing on a mic. But none of our training is for a microphone. Today we are all used to recording, but how to use that recording to actually complement and supplement your reference material, that is not taught. So I think in most areas we will all have to review the work that has been done. And I think there are many committed music circles that have for decades really given opportunities to younger musicians as well. But for example, one of the things that not many of them bother about is good sound for a concert. And when you say that, I want to, can I have this equipment for my concert, which would just be 2 or 3 microphones and a good mixer, then we are told very often by very good organizations, oh, what? Why do you need that? I mean, Ravi Shankarji performed on this 50 years ago. How dare you make this request? So I think, the review has to happen with the organizers, with people who are performing, with people who are listening. And I think it's only when a concerned society will address these issues that really a change will take place.
You focus on one side. I was also hoping you'll focus on the other side of the same equation, which is that if you are well trained and you despite support from family and all the rest of it, that you focused on, where people do a job in the day. But if you are well trained and you want to move forward in terms of your learning and perhaps training, and when you talk about jazz and classical music merging, and if you talk about gharanas merging, where do you see the future trends in terms of opportunities of that sort? And maybe going to, talking to overseas trends, that sort of thing.
Difficult question, because most of the projects where you bring together, let's say, jazz or other forms of music are usually initiated by people not from India. Very rarely does the project start from within India, and Indian musicians looking at the possibility of learning about another tradition and then trying to work on a collaboration. Also, the collaborations currently, whether they are initiated outside or from within India, are targeted towards an event. A collaboration, I feel, can never really be truly exploratory if you already have in mind that I have to give a performance at the end of it. You collaborate because you wish to collaborate with somebody, and then should the collaboration be worthy, considered worthy by all participants for sharing with the public, then it's possible to share it. Also, you know, we've always, when we're talking about jazz or collaboration with musical systems outside of India, we've never really looked at our neighbors, for example. We've never looked at, you know, whether it's close neighbors like Sri Lanka or Nepal, and we've not looked further even in Thailand, Indonesia. Yeah, exactly. So when the commerce is deciding what the collaboration should be like, that's already a pity for the arts. Because we should be looking at those collaborations. Nobody in any bilateral talk has said that, okay, let's give research opportunities to people wishing to find out about each other's musical systems. Never does it happen. Okay, we have a few Sri Lankan, Bhutanese, Nepalese students coming, ICCR giving them the chance to learn from gurus in India. But rarely do we get a chance to hear about music from Nepal. It's not taught in our syllabi. We have a world music course in some places. We don't teach about Nepal. We don't teach about Sri Lanka. And therefore this discussion is important, therefore, that if we feel this should happen, then we should ask for it. And unfortunately, when syllabi are drafted or authored, courses are made, people don't think of these things. Very often, my experience has been that people included in the discussion come from the world of Hindustani classical music. They decide that this is the most evolved system of music in the world, and there is nothing beyond this, and so they never look really at what is happening in the world. The future, I'm afraid, is going to look the same way, unless society actually, people from society ask for a different way of looking at these issues.
A few years back, we had some protest songs in Kalapura Festival. You are not recorded those songs, but not available anymore. That was the first time you were referring to a loco who was singing from there. And you sang so many of them. They were beautiful. They are not available.
I haven't recorded them, but yes, I intend to record them because self-publishing is now an option. I started that repertoire. I must mention, was unknown to me. About 2 decades ago, it was unknown to me. The first time that two of my friends, S. Kalidas and Sabina Sehgal, a journalist from Times of India, when they asked me to come to Delhi for a program called Artists Against Communalism. And they just said, this is done on the death anniversary of Sardar Hashmi on the 1st of January. And artists, painters, everybody comes together and they paint on the huge canvas on the road, on Sardar Hashmi Marg. For 15 minutes, all artists, whether it's Ustad Amjad Ali Khan or Sonal Mansingh, everybody performs under this one banner of Artists Against Communalism. So I said, "Tu bhi aa jana." I said, "Kitne baje hoga कार्यक्रम?" Because I thought, "कौन सा राग गाना है?" I कुछ नहीं पता, बस आ जाना. So clutching a tanpura in one hand, I reached there and I was completely blown away by the atmosphere. It was the street at Mandi House. And I looked around and my jaw kept dropping because there was Hussain Saab, there was Anjali Ilaman, and there was Ghulam Sheikh, everybody was there. And then when I looked on the other side of the street, there was this pandal and there were lots of people milling around, and on the stage, you could, I was just standing at the back and I could see all these eminent musicians come for 15 minutes, perform, and it was such an amazingly inspiring moment, that I was just left with holding the tanpura, and suddenly one of them said, "Chacha, teri bari, let's get up on stage." So I looked at my watch and it was around 12:15 or so in the afternoon. So I sang Vrindavani Sarang. And that was a rag which was appropriate for the time. And the next year, Sema started calling me for meetings and said, start trying to bring other artists under this banner. And slowly, some friends at Sema, Suhail Hashmi, Gohar Raza, many of them would give me a verse, either written by Kabir or written by Sahil Ludhianvi. And slowly I started composing those pieces. And every January 1st, I would stake my claim over there and say, I've prepared this year and I'd like to present this. Anish composed many things, and that concert really came from some of the compositions that Anish did as well. In the mainstream music industry, there is no place for such music or for such repertoire. But fortunately, because now the internet has made it possible for us to really publish ourselves and distribute ourselves, we do hope that someday we will be able to record it before I become toothless.
Any time frame?
We have done one or two pieces, and I'm happy to. I think we've done Faisab's Bol Kila Bazaar Hai Tere. We've already recorded that.
Is it available now for sale or
Bol Kila is
Bol Kila is available. And I've done 5 pieces from Kabir, but the others I still have to do.
Question. So I've been a student of both Carnatic and hip hop subjects for a very long time now. And the question that I struggle with these days is, how do you find the modern context to place a raga in? And because, especially in Carnatic music, I think we stopped around Tyagaraja and the Trinity, and we haven't, gone and tried to reinvent and look at a modern context for pieces themselves. So as a result, they're beautiful, they're absolutely brilliant, but that's kind of where the buck stopped. There were a few composers who came later on, like Papanasam Sivan and Balaji Krishna. I know that you've done a lot of work in the area, so could you shed some light on how you find, you talked about singing Vrindavan Saranga in the middle of the afternoon, but how do you place them in, say, the lyric, or how is it that you imagine the raga?
So it's primarily with the lyrics that you're questioning.
Actually, the general context, like how do you...
And in terms of the rag itself, rather in music itself, it's really not difficult to use that as a vehicle for expressing, but without really saying that this is, pointing to a certain area of concern. With lyrics, yes, it's a big, huge problem that I've struggled with and have not found a solution for. I tried to write, my own bandish, lyrics for a bandish. And I found that I was constantly sounding it was, first of all, it was not original thought at all. And just by being able to cobble together lines which rhyme, which we call the gandhi, it didn't make sense. It was like a bad copy of something that already existed. But I haven't been able to use the Hindi that I normally speak at home. I haven't been able to find my way around that. Some composers, very few have done that. Kumarji, for example, was able to do that. So there are many of his compositions which, I think there is one in Narike Pucho Nare. Every artist's nightmare of people, an organizer calling them, being very persuasive about coming to the concert and then dumping them in a hotel room and forgetting about them. So Kumarji experienced the same thing and wrote, "Moye bulaaye ke pucho na re, mujhe bulaya aur kuch bhi nahi rahe ho, ajab reet tero re." So he was able to do that. It was the genius of Kumarji which was able to do that. I haven't been able to find a solution. Other composers too. I recently met Satyashil Deshpande in Pune, and he too is trying to write in a. He's taking a direction which is also away from the typical Braj Bhasha lyrics that we are normally used to learning. But yes, that's an area which I'm sure people will try to grapple. I do, and I haven't found a solution. I've also heard of experiments where Hindustani classical musicians are trying to write compositions in English. So, you know, thunder, lightning, in the but I'm not really sure that that's the answer. But yeah, that's truly an area that needs to be studied.
It's a comfort to know that somebody else is that you are in that struggle. So
Yeah, because I'm able to you know, to make lines rhyme and create some kind of, it's a hoax, you know, it's not really true. It doesn't really look true for me.
Big fan. I just wanted to ask you if you can remember a few names or the voices that inspired your uniqueness, nationally or international voices that you were like, you listened to them and you were like, yeah, this is something that I cannot conquer, but I'm inspired to sing in my own.
Many. I'll begin with some that, you know, that are the most played on my iPod or whatever.
Sure.
You know, Begum Akhtar. It's her centenary year, for example.
Yeah.
And now here's this voice, this ease with the form of ghazal,
Yeah.
which, you know, has always inspired me. It leaves you humbled, and it's also inspiring at the same time. But you know, the one thing that Begum Akhtar has taught me, without ever having actually taught me, is that it's no point trying to copy her. And, you know, for years, at different points, when I hear a good piece of music, you know, apart from that constant delicious feeling, you know, you also want to try and sound like that. But, you know, I have never been able to. When the people that I admire the most, it's very difficult for me to sing a piece which I've heard in their voice. So, Kalidas, for example, wrote a book on Begum Akhtar, and he asked me to sing at the launch. And I said, sure, only one condition, I will not sing a single piece which she has done, because I can't do that, you know, I just don't like to. With classical music, it's very difficult because some of the greatest compositions have been rendered so beautifully, and you can't get out of not singing them. You do have to learn them, and you have to go through the self-inflicted torture of listening to your own voice singing them. But really speaking, Begum Akhtar is one of those voices, Siddheshwari Devi, and I particularly make this point about singers who are considered great divas of what they called light music. There is nothing light about the music that they present.
Nothing.
Siddheshwari Devi's voice, her, you know, even her voice in her old age, which has got a lot of gravel in it, which is cracking at times. There's such an immense mastery. There is such an immense wisdom in the voice that it's just impossible to, you know, you can only say, my God, and just tune that tanpura again and sit down and start trying to do your scales again. So these are two of the many people I've admired hugely.
Thank you.
You were talking about films, but then yes, Bollywood works in a certain fashion, but you've done films like Raincoat and Garner Baksho, and also so how was your experience working with, say, Devjyoti Mishra or Shantanu Moitra, especially in Raincoat?
Devjyoti Mishra, you know, was a complete, how can I say, it was complete joy to work with him. I believe, and I hesitate to say this very bluntly because I don't know enough about film work to really be making sweeping statements about it. But I'm told that in the film world, you make a song and then you call a singer, and if that singer is not free, you call some other singer. So you, in a sense, the voice of the singer is substitutable. But when I was asked to sing for Raincoat, I was concerned about things like key. What key has he made the track in? Because of my voice, the range of my voice, what is comfortable for me. But it was very clear that Debuda was very sure that he wanted me to be comfortable. He came all the way to Delhi to teach me the song and to play the song to me. And then to say that, okay, here's the song, keep it with you, and then you tell me what key is comfortable for you, I'll make the track on that key. And if you want to change anything, you want to give a twist, tell me, I will work it accordingly. So he has given me a lot of freedom, really. And at the same time, it's not just saying, okay, here's the song, do what you want to with it. Because that's not what I want. I would like to be as true to the composer as I can. So it's been a wonderful association with him, where he has the clarity and the mastery to say, here's the composition, and I can say to him with confidence that, Vibhuda, can I do this on this line? And if he says, no, Shubha, that's not sounding great, I accept it. So it's a wonderful, harmonious way of working, and I have truly enjoyed working with him. Similarly with Shantanu Moitra. We haven't worked together for a long time now, but he always loves giving me surprises. When we worked together for the first time in an album called Apke Sawan, he spent a lot of time working on, I think there's 7 songs in the album. And 6 of the songs he prepared, and he would tell me, okay, this is the tune, we would have discussions, these are the lyrics. I would go through the lyrics saying, this is uncomfortable, can we do this, can we do that? Last song he wouldn't tell me. I came to Bombay, I recorded all the songs, and where's the last song? I said, Shubha, मैं कुछ तुम्हारे साथ ना Guns N' Roses type का करना चाहती ridiculous. Guns N' Roses? अच्छा चलो तुम ये मत सुनो. Now you start getting your classical bee in your bonnet. तुम ये मत बोलो. Forget I ever said this. And then he and Prasoon Joshi very conspiratorially give me a piece of paper on which these lyrics are written in English. Apke Sawan aise barse. Now, I'm fluent with English, but come on, reading Hindi in English, I mean, written like that is very tough for me. So I quickly made my Devanagari version of it. And then they said, okay, let's play the track. And I listened to the track and said, it's very high, you know. So I said, एक try karo. So I said, okay, try karte, and then we'll break for lunch, and then we'll decide whether this works or not. And I was happy that this is not the final take, or this, I don't have to, so I belted it out and had fun and giggled and laughed in between, and then they just erased the giggling and the laughing and then kept the song, and they said, that's it. So that was how Apke Sawan was recorded. And then Shantanu did a lot of film music and came to Bombay, settled in Bombay, and gives me a call one day and says, I'm doing a film with Pranita, so I'd like you to sing a song. I didn't even ask him what song. I go into the studio, and then he tells me, Laga Chunari Medal. Now this is a classic, you know, Manna Dey has sung it so beautifully. I grew up with the song. But Shantanu, you're mad? Are you going to ask me to sing this classic? I would hate my voice in that song. ज़्यादा मत बोलो, जर्नलिस्ट लोग आए हुए हैं, अभी सब देख रहे हैं कि हम लोग लड़ रहे हैं. So that's the kind of surprise. And then he asked me to sing for a Bangla film, Panch Kodhaya. And he asks me to sing a Bangla song and asks Kaushiki Chakravarti, who's a true blue-blooded Bengali, to sing a Hindi song. So he comes up with these surprises, all of which are finally end in a lot of fun. So that it's been good working with him as well.
Tell us about your Anishi and her contributing stories in a song. I love that project. Yes, so it was lovely. Tell us something.
Delighted to hear you enjoyed it, because it was really a project that we wanted to do for a long time. And we didn't know how to go about it, because Anisha's research, of course, and his forthcoming book is about Bombay and music in Bombay. But you know, over the years, both of us have been reading a lot, not only in English, but I read in Hindi, Anish is in Marathi, Gujarati. So he's really, both of us had all these sort of notes from various sources, which talked about music making in different contexts and about different forms, which seemed to bring alive the entire music, you know. And we kept wondering, you know, somebody should make a film about this, because the entire context of that particular music will become apparent when a strong audio-visual message is sent out. But we are not filmmakers and we don't know about films. When we were curating our festival, Baja Gaja, And we thought it would be a great idea if we could persuade our theatre friends to perhaps collaborate with us. And we had gone to a Prithvi festival which was dedicated to musicals, and we watched Sunil Shambal's play at the opening, where all the actors were singing. And I said, this looks like just the thing to follow. So we cornered Sunil Shambal, and we asked him if it could be possible to do a theatre production which told stories about music and music making. So we sourced them either from academic research works or from collections and compilations about one form of music, for example, Kajri, or even from fiction which described music making or which was about musicians. Right. And he said, okay, I'll work on 7 of these. And look, this is only going to work in your music festival. It's not going to work outside. So we felt that okay, he's ticked us off and told us this is only work in a music festival. And then we set about the wonderful task of auditioning actors who could sing. We were just completely surprised by the willingness of these wonderful actors to actually, they were not saying no to anything, you know. So if we were saying, will you try and sing a Thumri? There was no hesitation. Huh? I'll come to you and learn, no problem. They were ready to take up the challenge, you know, which was really inspiring for us. And we then chose compositions which could be rendered by them, because yes, having said that they're brilliant actors ready to sing, it's also very difficult to imbibe the nuances of, let's say, Qawwali or Thumri. You have to spend a lifetime doing that. So we chose compositions where their presentation would work, or then created compositions which would work. So based on Qawwali or based on Kajri, and we worked on that. And suddenly everything started coming together, and this English Kajri which I had read in a tiny little book on Kajris, after taking Murli Radhe, he smiling told Murari Syam, where is your Murli Mohan? Then began to search Bihari Syam. So we managed to finally, I mean, Sunil had to do a lot of work, he had to get the script written, the dialogues done, but it all came together magically at Baja Gaja, this festival that we curated and organized for 4 years in Pune. And then the audience loved it, and we looked triumphantly at each other and said, yeah, we did it. But then Sunil still said, you musicians, the audience, Baki, don't think it's going to work anywhere else. And then one fine day he just said, I think, you know, I've got a few dates from Prithvi, I think I'll do one show of stories in a song. I'm happy to say that it's done over 75 shows now.
We heard there's going to be a stories in song too.
It was done, but now what we're doing is that at different shows, Sunil chooses some of the episodes. So it doesn't remain the same sequence each time. We keep adding.
It's a mix of.
Yeah.
I've already watched it twice.
Classical good music depends on the riyas, right?
All music depends on Riyaz.
Do you think in a place, polluted places like Bombay, Delhi or any other cities, can emerging talents can do riyas and can be successful? My suggestion is, why you singers and all can ask for government of India or some government authority to establish a place away from this pollution, so that the new emerging talent can also be included in the way. I give you excellent example. In olden times, you know, Tansen Guru Swami Haridas used to live in a jungle, and Tansen has to go and reside there and then come back.
We would like there to be no pollution either of the environment or of the mind. So the pollution, unfortunately, is not always only. I think it's a great suggestion, but I also think, you know, that if one looks for that ideal situation, you can work towards it. I think it's a great suggestion to create a space which allows. Yes, but the environment must be made. You know, I can't wait for the ideal. If I say today that no, I'll only do my riyas when I find this place where nobody disturbs me, where there'll be complete comfort. You know, I have to, finally it's the space between your ears that has to be completely concentrated and completely as free of pollution as possible.
Tradition.
Yes, it was a tradition, but many of those great gurus came to a city like Bombay and spread the word about music and acquired many disciples. They have done, sterling work in bringing music to various places. Theirs was like a pioneering work. So we can't only ask for that. I feel what I'd like to do is take all my students to my little home in the hills and say, okay, 1 month of teaching and rehas over here. So, friends, you're invited.
I had a question.
Yes.
It's just a happy coincidence that today is Ramran's birth anniversary, but you also learned from other gurus, and all of them, I believe, were in search of a voice for themselves. So, how did you imbibe that that element from them, and how has that affected your music?
Yeah, it is a wonderful coincidence that today is the birth anniversary of my guru, Pandit Ramashreta. But as Anish mentioned, the people that I learned from several people. In fact, that's why very often when they're describing me, they put, instead of gharana, eclectic in brackets. But really speaking, I learned Thumri from Naina Devi ji. I learned Khayal, apart from Ramran, from whom I continued to learn till he passed away in 2009. I learned from Pandit Vinay Chandra Mudgal. I learned from Pandit Vasant Thakar, Kumar Gagarji, and Pandit Jitendra Abhisheki. And all of them were, they had no qualms about being interested in music other than classical music. Naina ji, for example, loved Qawwali and loved Ghazal. And she was actually a chief producer on Doordarshan for many years. So she would actually curate concerts inviting other artists to come and record for Doordarshan. And I think their wide interest in a variety of forms. Ramran himself is considered, in fact some people call him the Bhatkande of modern times. And yet, I remember a night in Delhi when he was at our home, and he started singing folk songs to us. And they sounded as if they had been around for millions of years. It's only at the end of the verse where he said Ram Ram that we realized it was his composition. So I got all these, I've been fortunate to inherit this kind of liberal approach, which is not orthodox and yet deeply reverential for tradition. And I think that's really helped me a lot. People ask me, what did your gurus say when you sang Ali More Anna? Well, they never said, first of all, I would never have the guts to go and play anything to them that I had recorded. I would hide all my CDs when Guruji came home. Whether it was Basant Mukhari or whether it was Yaman, I didn't want him to hear those because I just felt I can't play them to him. But at the same time, he taught me so many compositions of folk music. He taught me Chaupai and Doha from the Ramayana. Naina ji would call me suddenly late at night and say, Suno, ek sher yaad aa gaya hai, ise likh lo, main bhul jaungi. That's the kind of generosity I have inherited and was very fortunate to receive from them. And that really has helped me a lot in being able to really sort of keep telling myself how fortunate I am to be in a place like India, which has such diverse musical styles and expressions. And as a listener, I couldn't be richer.
I think we have time for one last question. Yeah, then she has to sing.
Then you have to sing.
Please, please. I have another question. How has your musical expression evolved over the years as a 25-year-old producer?
That's for the listeners to say.
Yeah, I think that's better left to the critics and the listeners. I don't know whether it has evolved or regressed, but expression is really something which can't, I really wouldn't be able to talk about that.
How has your music aspiration evolved since you were 25 to now? Was there different things you
I wish I could be 16 again and go back to my talim and learning yet again. Because I wasted a lot of time then and realize now that I should have been doing many other things.
Perhaps you can
I beg your pardon?
With little more effort, you can see.
Are you sure? Thank you, thank you. I'm closer to the 60 mark now.
By heart, you should listen.
By heart, तो हमेशा करते हैं.
Then can we request you to sing for us?
From Krishna temples, in the Vaishnava tradition. And of course that is usually sung and offered in worship ritual. But the wonderful thing about it is that it talks about every possible occasion. So every season, every part of the day, every celebration of festivities, all of that is mentioned in the poems. And of course, this is the monsoon, so Jula and Hindola is very common. So there's one piece which I've just been working on. Jhulat rasit mohan raay, Jhulat rasit mohan raay, sang bhamini damini ghar beech manodar saay, jhulat rasit mohan raay, jhulat rasit mohan raay, kadla chakma chakna chalak adbhut, kadla chakma chakna chalak adbhut, let chit ke chor aur बढ़ गई झूलन झनन झनन किंकिणी धुन सोर झूलत रसिक मोह